Happy Tuesday to you, January 16th, Spartans. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the long weekend. You can see the agenda for today. We have our weekly check-ins. Need to do that once this week, either by Zoom or by email. I am going to point it out so you have plenty of warning. There is not going to be a Zoom on Thursday. Shouldn't really affect you unless you have questions. Thursday, I'm going to be occupado. I'll be in the district office all day, so I will not be available by Zoom. However, I should still be available by email. I'll be checking that throughout the day. So we have a Zoom today. We have a Zoom on Friday, but there is, yet again, no Zoom on Thursday. So between today, Tuesday the 16th, and Friday, January 19th, do make sure to check in with me at least once. I should be pretty short and quick today. We're talking about the Yom Kippur War. Again, we're still looking at how the Israelis have been able to take land from the Palestinians, land that was set aside for them. And then we're done. You have the rest of the time to work once we talk about the Yom Kippur War. This more or less summarizes how the Israelis have been able to, again, take land from the Palestinians. You have a class survey to do. I'm requesting that this be done by tomorrow at 1:30 so I can use that information for the video on Thursday. And then today you'll finish up the movie Hope in the Holy Land and the video guide. Please make sure to submit that by Thursday. Let's get to it. The Yom Kippur War. Again, before we actually get to the Yom Kippur War, we need to go back here just to jog our memory. Again, when the United Nations partitioned Palestine, they cut it, basically down the middle, going halvesies between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The Israelis are supposed to get the orange on the left. The Palestinians are supposed to get the yellow. But since 1946, you can see the amount of Palestinian land more or less dwindle. 47, all right? They got, I don't know, about 40% of the land that they were supposed to have. We go into up to 1967, sweet baby James are down to like 22% of the land that they were supposed to have. And then we go to today, right, in the 21st century, they have even less than that. How have the Israelis been able to take this land? Well, again, we've already covered the Independence War, the 1948 war. We've already talked about the Six-Day War. And now we're going to go to the Yom Kippur War, which was in 1973. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. It is one of the highest holidays amongst the Jewish faith. The Arab nations surrounding Israel knew this. I mean, everything shuts down in Israel on Yom Kippur. And I mean everything. It's not just businesses. It's not just companies. It's not just jobs. I'm talking like no TV, no radio. No one works. It is a day to repent for your sins. So on this day, when everyone is at home celebrating a religious holiday, the Egyptians, launched an attack. The Syrians launched an attack, thinking that here is their chance to seek redress for the whooping that they received in the Independence War and in the Six-Day War. And to be quite honest, the Egyptians do make some progress, right? The Egyptians right here are going to make a pretty significant gain in the Sinai Peninsula. And Syria is going to make significant gain into the Golan Heights, but it doesn't last very long because, again, Israel has a standing military in which their citizens are required for military service during their life. So while the gains were made by the Egyptians and the Syrians early on in this conflict, it doesn't last long. And the Israelis are very quick to mobilize because, again, hear me say it a second time, they have a standing military where people are ready to go at a moment's notice. And as a result of that, the Israelis are very quick at not just repelling the Egyptians and repelling the Syrians. They're able to go on the offensive, reaching, within 30, 40 miles of Cairo, the capital of Egypt, and as well as Damascus, the capital of Syria. Right. Initially, they gave up land because they were at home celebrating a holiday. But again, very quickly, they're able to expel the Egyptians from the Sinai Peninsula and Syria from Golan Heights, and then continue to lay a whooping as they continue to drive and more or less obtain more land from the Syrians and the Egyptians. What is interesting about this war is that it brings another component of the 21st century existence for you and I into play. The 6-Day War, the 6-Day War will start more or less the existence of terrorism. Right? What the terroristic activity in this region from the 6-Day War is more or less the foundation for Islamic terrorism that we see today. What results from the Yom Kippur War is the use of embargoes or reduction of oil productions from OPEC. That affects us today. Why is the United States so heavily involved in any sort of conflict that occurs in North Africa and Southwest Asia? It's because there's oil there. So anytime there's a flare between the Saudis and the Iranians, or anytime there's a conflict in between Sunnis and Shia, or one Middle Eastern country and the next, think Iraq and Kuwait from the early 1990s, the first time we went in to the Middle East. It's because there's oil there. What new phenomenon begins in the during the Yom Kippur War that still exists today is the threat of oil production, the reduction of oil production from OPEC countries. OPEC stands for the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. You can see all of the countries here that are a part of OPEC. Most of them are going to be in North Africa and Southwest Asia, but yet Ecuador is a part of it, Venezuela is a part of it, all right? Nigeria is a part of it. These are all countries that produce petroleum, oil. They realize that if they work together in producing and selling oil to the rest of the world, if they worked in concert with one another, they can make a lot of money. Because basically what they've agreed to do is sell oil for the same price. They've eliminated themselves from competing with each other, which allows them to set a price and the rest of the world has to pay for it. It's like a cartel, if you will. During the Yom Kippur War, OPEC came out, the Arab members of OPEC came out and said they are going to reduce oil production by 5% for each month that the Israeli military is present in territories that they did not hold after the 1967 Six-Day War. And again, I've explained in previous videos that there is one thing that countries care about. There's one thing that citizens of countries care about. And I wish I could say it would be peace and food security and loving compassion and kindness, but that's not the case. The Western world, European countries, the United States care about one thing, and that's the economy. And we should know that the Western European nations and the United States economy is based on oil. Because if oil prices go up, then everything else in our economy goes up. And our governments care about one thing, and that's the economy, because we know that if the economy goes bad, whoever's in office is getting voted out. So the Arab nations that belong to OPEC more or less start playing some pretty serious hardball. You guys want to support the Israelis, then we're going to hurt your economy. It's the exact same thing that the United States had been doing with its economic sanctions of any country that it didn't like its behavior. We've done it against Cuba. We've done it against Middle Eastern nations. We're doing it right now against the Russians and North Korea. It's a logical, peaceful. I mean, it is peaceful. It's not military, but it is a logical step that countries take to change a country's behavior short of actually going to war. And it begins in the 1970s. This causes a catastrophe in the United States because in addition to reducing oil production by 5% every single month until the Israelis returned land to Egypt and Syria that it didn't hold in 1967, the United States was put under an oil embargo from the Arab nations, meaning that Arab nations would not sell oil to the United States. And this causes absolute chaos in the US. This is when gas stations literally start running out of gas by 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. You would have people, and you can see the picture on the right, where you've got cars more or less running circles around the gas pumps. They were in line. They would get up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning and wait their turn trying to get gas. Gas had to be rationed where, gas trucks would, depending on the number of the day, right? There's either an odd number of the day or an even number of the day. And addresses for gas stations were either an odd number or an even number. So on odd days, odd addressed gas stations would receive fuel. On even days, even number days, even addressed gas stations would receive fuel. And then depending on your address, you either have an odd address or an even address. You could only get gas on an odd day or an even day, depending on where you lived. But even then, there's no guarantee that you would get gas. And you'd have people lined up waiting for gas for hours. Think about how often you drive your vehicle. Excuse me, or how often your parents drive their vehicle. I mean, this is an everyday thing. You got to get to school, you got to get to work. The United States doesn't have mass transportation like European countries do by train, rail, what have you. This caused a huge, huge problem for the United States. And to this day, we still experience a rise in the cost of fuel anytime there's a conflict that occurs in the Middle East, because Arab OPEC nations understand that the United States is dependent on oil. The Arab OPEC nations understand that the United States has a longstanding, upheld alliance with the Israeli people. So if there's a conflict in this region, they're going to try to hurt our economy by jacking up oil prices. It has resulted in the 21st century some people questioning our government, our country's blind alliance with the Israeli people. Because really the only thing that we're going to care about is what we have in our wallet. Oh, all right. That's it for the Yom Kippur War. You got the gist of it and the greater significance and how it affects you today. I would like you to respond to 2 survey questions, pretty straightforward. It is anonymous. Question number 1, with which people do you have sympathy for in regards to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? So you're going to finish up the documentary today. You know the conflict between the Israeli-Palestinian people. Part of it is land, part of it is religion, part of it is control of religious sites, which everyone has a stake into. You've got the hostilities from the Arab nations. You have the defense from the Israelis. You have the Israelis taking territory that was never set aside for them. Who do you sympathize for? Do you sympathize with the Israeli people, or do you sympathize with the Palestinian people? There is no right answer here. And depending on generation, we'll see a significant difference in who supports whom based on when people were born. Second question. I'd like you to explain why you support the group that you do. If you pick the Israeli people, why do you support them? If you support the Palestinian people in this conflict, why do you support them? Again, there is no wrong answer. And just because you support the Palestinian people doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic. And just because you support the Israeli people doesn't make you Islamophobic. Right? There is more to this. There is more to this conversation than just a religious prejudice. You can support one group or another completely absent of one's religious ideology. So I'd like you to respond to that survey again by tomorrow, 1:30, so I can prep the next conversation for Thursday. And then finish the video for today. Again, no Zoom on Thursday. There will be a Zoom on Friday. I know they changed the schedule this week for synchronous classes, but we're not running synchronous classes here. This is an asynchronous class, so there will be new information coming to you on Friday. Hope you had a great weekend. If you have any questions, drop me an email. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on Friday. Go Spartans.